choice for those 500,000 people with student loans in New Zealand.
Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak to the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 3 at its second reading. Let me just say from the outset, Mr Speaker, that this is about making sure that student loans, which are among the most generous in the world, are going to be sustainable into the future. And this government is absolutely focused on that. It needs to be sustainable, and that means that people need to see their obligations through and pay off their debts. It is absolutely not a gift, it is a loan. And the opposition rabbit on, and there's much more flannel than fact. They talk about people who want to come back for weddings. They talk about offering carrots, not sticks. What we're talking about is people taking personal responsibilities for their obligations. And what this loan is all about is actually trying to make sure that the overseas borrowers, who are in fact the people who are at fault here, need to really step up to the plate. So what we have here, it is a time, and there are mechanisms within this. It was a robust process through Select Committee. We've debated it already in this House, and it now comes up for something that needs to be examined more closely. Let's look at what needs to happen. What needs to happen is that people from 2010 onwards have been encouraged by this government to repay their loans. $90 million has been repaid. We've tried a variety of measures. We've tried to encourage. We've tried to give them every form of encouragement, actually. And now we're stepping it up. So we're saying, and let me say, actually, from pretty much the outset of my call, that I would really like to congratulate the majority of borrowers who have made, like Simon O'Connor, like many other students, like many of us on this side of the House, and probably in the opposition benches as well, who've actually repaid their student loans, because that's exactly what we need to do, and I commend them on that. And for those of you who have paid your loans back, then it is an issue of fairness. Why should others who default and go overseas and don't bother to meet their obligations get away with it? They need to step up to the plate, and that's something that we really need to encourage. Nobody wants to arrest people at borders, but let's look at the facts, basically. This is consistent with the Child Support Act 1991. There is a precedent there. So that a warrant can be issued if the court is satisfied that a liable parent will leave New Zealand with intent to avoid their child support obligations. And that's the same word that we use in relation to student loans. It's about obligations. So when we look at that precedent and we say, reluctantly, if there are persistent defaulters who live overseas and who are not paying, then they must look very carefully at that. It would be a last resort, but we need to use these kind of measures, because when we look at the numbers, when we look at the facts, there are over 100,000 overseas-based borrowers, and a very significant number of those, 61,000, are just not meeting their repayment obligations. This is simply not acceptable. So it needs to be put into place that we need to ring their parents. We need to put some pressure on from the whānau and the families and say, and in fact, some of the people who came to the Select Committee and talked about this, and people we've talked to on a number of occasions around this, have all said the same thing, that in fact when the mother or father or the relations ring up, funnily enough, the children do get a sense of shame and they get on with it and they repay the loan. Well, shame they're not meeting their obligations. Meeting their obligations and a sense of entitlement is something that the brayers and naysayers on the other side of the House are very, very expert in, particularly those who are trying to heckle at the moment. Labor don't really care if it doesn't get paid. There's a lot of political mileage being made out of this, and it's all stuff and nonsense. We are taking measures that may not be popular with your friend who wants to come back for a wedding, Mr Robertson, but that's just too bad. That individual should actually step up to the plate and make a point of trying to pay back their loan. If people are getting into difficulty with paying it back, then they should get in touch with IRD, they should say that their circumstances have changed, and they should try and make an arrangement, because it's not fair on all those people that have paid off their student loans over the years that these people continue to get away with it. So I support the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 3 unreservedly and commend it to the House. Thank you.
Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. I rise to oppose